The air in the room was thick with silence. Maxwell Anderson stood frozen in the doorway of his 10-year-old son's bedroom. His jaw dropped. His hands trembled. His heart pounded with a mixture of shock, joy, and something he hadn't felt in a long time. Right there, in the middle of the large bed, was Andrew, fast asleep. His red eyes finally closed, lips slightly parted, breathing soft and steady. And resting gently on the legs of a girl dressed in nothing but a worn-out, ash-colored gown, her face stained with dry dust and sorrow, her arms wrapped protectively around him as if she'd always belonged there. She was still humming a lullaby, barely audible now, and stroking Andrew's back as if he were her little brother. Maxwell blinked. His eyes moved from his sleeping son to the girl holding him. Her name was Adana. An hour ago, she was just another homeless orphan under Oshodi Bridge, barefoot and invisible. Now, she was in his mansion, wearing rags, and cradling the one person the best doctors couldn't help. Behind him, two of his security guards stood stiff, their mouths slightly open in disbelief. Maxwell turned his head slowly toward them and whispered, "He's sleeping." None of them replied. Adana looked up, startled by the silence. Her eyes, wide and confused, met Maxwell's. She looked scared, as if she had done something wrong. "I just sang for him," she whispered nervously. "That's all." Maxwell stepped forward, each footfall soft, afraid to wake the boy who hadn't slept for days. He gently reached for Andrew and carried him to the bed. The boy stirred slightly, but didn't open his eyes. He was truly asleep. Maxwell's hands trembled as he adjusted the blanket over his son. He looked down at Adana again, this strange girl with mud on her face and kindness in her eyes. "Follow me," he said quietly. Adana stood slowly, unsure if she was in trouble. She didn't know this was the first time in 3 years Maxwell Anderson felt like smiling from the inside. Maxwell Anderson wasn't the kind of man who believed in miracles. He was a billionaire CEO of Anderson Group, a company worth billions, with branches across the world. But all his money couldn't solve Andrew's problem. The boy hadn't slept peacefully. It started after his 10th birthday. One night, he simply couldn't fall asleep. He'd lie in bed, tossing, turning, crying. The best pediatricians in Lagos tried everything. Tests, therapy, sleeping pills. Nothing worked. Then came the strange conclusion from a respected old doctor. There is no medical cause. He just needs someone he feels safe with. Someone he connects to deeply, not you. Not your staff. Someone special. Maxwell tried everyone. Maids, tutors, even a kind elderly woman from the village. Andrew would scream, cry, and beg for his father instead. But even when Maxwell lay beside him, Andrew remained restless. Then today, Maxwell decided to take Andrew to the office. Maybe a change of environment would help. They were in the car, waiting for the gate to open at their Lekki home, when Andrew suddenly tapped the window. "Daddy, who is that?" Maxwell turned. She was sitting under the flyover bridge beside a pile of scrap metal and plastic bottles, shielding herself from the sun with a torn umbrella. A dirty plate sat in front of her with a few coins in it. Her hair was scattered, her feet bruised, her body trembling from exhaustion. "I think she's homeless," Maxwell said flatly. Andrew stared. "She looks sad." Maxwell's chest tightened. "Yeah, she probably is. Can we help her?" Maxwell sighed. He had donated to orphanages, built schools, and paid hospital bills for strangers. But this request came from Andrew, and that made it different. "Okay, let's go to her." They crossed the road together. As they approached, Adana lifted her eyes, ready to beg. But Maxwell smiled gently. "What's your name?" he asked. "Adana," she said cautiously. He gave her food, then money. Then, without thinking too deeply, he said, "You want to come with us? We can help you." Her eyes widened. "To your house?" Andrew grabbed her hand before she could process it. "Come, stay in my room," Maxwell chuckled. "Let's just get you cleaned up first." Now Adana sat in Maxwell's home office, her hands clenched in her lap, her legs, scratched and dusty, pressed against the edge of the chair. Her eyes shifted from the gold-framed photo of Olivia, Maxwell's late wife, to the giant painting of the Lagos skyline on the wall. Maxwell sat across from her, still stunned. "How did you do that?" Adana's voice trembled. I didn't do anything special. I just sang. What song? It's the lullaby my mother used to sing for me when I was little. Before they were taken. Maxwell leaned forward. Taken? She nodded. We were sleeping at home. One night, men broke in. I heard screams. I ran under the bed. My parents were taken away. I never saw them again. Maxwell clenched his fists. I had to beg to survive, she continued. I was the best student in my secondary school, got all A's, but I couldn't afford food, let alone school. So I stayed under the bridge. I just waited for the next day. Tears rolled down Maxwell's cheeks. She wasn't just a random girl. She was a survivor. And somehow she had healed what the world's best doctors couldn't. I want you to stay, he said softly. From today, you are part of this family. Adana's lips parted. What? You're my daughter now, Andrew's sister. I'll take care of you, feed you, clothe you, send you to school, whatever you need. Adana broke into tears, sobbing quietly into her hands. Outside, the moonlight washed over the mansion, calm and quiet. And in one bedroom, for the first time in years, Andrew slept peacefully, his small arms still curled as if remembering the lullaby that carried him into dreamland. That night, Maxwell stayed up in his study, staring at old family photos. A thought haunted him. Why did Andrew connect with Adana so easily? Why her? He picked up an old envelope from Olivia's belongings, one he had never opened since her death. As he slowly tore it open, the first line made his blood run cold. If something ever happens to me, and you find a girl named Adana. His hands trembled. Please protect her like you would protect Andrew. Maxwell stared at the letter in his hands. His fingers trembled as he unfolded the delicate paper, its edges yellowed by time. His late wife Olivia's handwriting stared back at him, each stroke of the pen soaked in urgency, fear, and love. Max, if something ever happens to me, and you find a girl named Adana, please protect her like you would protect Andrew. His breath caught in his throat. He sat back slowly, heart pounding in his chest. How did Olivia know that name? Adana. The same name as the girl now asleep in Andrew's room, the same girl who had, without knowing it, healed their son by simply holding him close. He turned the page over. There was more. Adana is the daughter of my best friend Sandra. She saved my life once. We lost touch after she moved to Ibadan. She had a little girl. I couldn't trace her after the crisis, but I made a promise. If I ever find Adana, I must help her. Maxwell's vision blurred with tears. He clutched the letter to his chest and stared at the wall. This wasn't random. This wasn't luck. It was destiny. The next morning, Adana opened her eyes slowly. She was no longer on the floor of Oshodi Bridge, fighting sleep on a slab of concrete. She was wrapped in soft sheets. The air smelled of lemon and flowers. A brand new gown lay on the edge of the bed, along with slippers and a note in neat handwriting. Good morning, Adana. Please wear these and come to the garden when you're ready. Maxwell. She smiled gently, touching the dress as if afraid it would disappear. In the Anderson Mansion's garden, beneath a white gazebo wrapped in vines, Maxwell waited with Andrew. Andrew looked like a different child. His face was brighter. The dark circles under his eyes were fading. He was holding a book and giggling at something Maxwell said. Then they saw her. Adana stepped out in the new blue gown. Her hair, now washed and gently brushed back, caught the sun. Her skin glowed, free from yesterday's dust. She looked stunned by her reflection in the garden glass. Andrew stood up immediately. Adana! She smiled. You're awake. I slept all night. He beamed, running to her and hugging her waist. I didn't even wake up once. Maxwell's throat tightened again. Come sit, he said gently. She did. He looked at her, still trying to believe what was happening. Adana, he began softly. Do you remember your mother's name? Adana blinked. Yes, her name was Sandra. Sandra Okoye. Maxwell gasped. Andrew looked up, confused. Daddy? Maxwell turned away for a moment to hide his emotion. He then reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter. He handed it to Adana. Read this. She read it slowly. Her hands began to shake. Sandra, that's my mother. Olivia. She promised to protect me? Maxwell nodded. Yes, your mother saved my wife. This was never a coincidence. Adana's voice cracked. You mean, my mother was alive? For how long? What happened to her? Maxwell looked down. I don't know. I'm going to find out. I promise. Adana wiped her tears quickly as Andrew clung to her side. Will you still stay with me tonight? He asked. She nodded. Always. Maxwell stood and stepped back, letting the sun bathe them both. One night had changed everything. Weeks later, Adana adjusted quickly to life in the mansion. She had a private tutor, clothes of her own, and a room right next to Andrew's. But despite everything, she never forgot her past. She insisted Maxwell help her find other children at Oshodi Bridge. Every weekend, she and Andrew would take food and clothes to the spot where she once begged for food. Maxwell built a shelter near the bridge, named it the Olivia Sandra Foundation. Andrew's sleeping problem disappeared, but one night, something strange happened. Thunder rumbled. Rain battered the windows. Maxwell was in his study when Andrew burst in, eyes wide with panic. Daddy! Adana's crying in her sleep. Maxwell rushed to her room. Adana was tossing on the bed, mumbling in her dream. Mama, don't go, please. Maxwell touched her gently. She woke with a gasp, her chest heaving. I saw her, she whispered. I saw my mother. She was behind bars. She was calling my name. Maxwell froze. What? She's alive. I know it. She's not dead. She's not dead. Andrew hugged her tightly. Maxwell knew that look. It was not fear. It was fire. Adana had survived the streets. Now she had a home. But she wouldn't rest until she found the truth. That night, Maxwell made a phone call to a private investigator in Abuja. I need you to search for a woman named Sandra Okoye. Disappeared over 10 years ago. Possibly held somewhere. What's the urgency, sir? Maxwell's voice shook. Because I think my son's life, and the girl who saved him, are part of something much bigger. 3 weeks had passed since the stormy night Adana dreamed of her mother behind bars. But the memory refused to fade. It haunted her. Each night, each time she closed her eyes, she saw Sandra reaching out through rusted prison bars, whispering her name. During the day, Adana threw herself into lessons with her tutors, helping Andrew with schoolwork and volunteering with Maxwell's new foundation. But Maxwell could see it in her eyes. She was waiting. For news. For hope. For a miracle. Maxwell didn't tell her much about the private investigator he hired. He didn't want to raise her expectations too soon. But inside, he was restless. Olivia's letter, the name Sandra, the connection to Adana, the way Andrew finally slept after years of torment. It was all too precise to ignore. He needed answers, and then they came. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Adana and Andrew were in the garden painting flower pots. Adana was laughing, her white top stained with orange paint. Andrew had splashed green paint on her cheeks. Maxwell stepped onto the patio, phone pressed to his ear, face pale. Adana, he said quietly. She looked up. I need to talk to you. Alone. Her heart thudded. She followed him to the study. There, standing near the window, was a tall, elderly man in a brown suit. His eyes were sharp, his voice deep. Miss Adana, the man said. I'm Detective Nnamdi Obi. I've been working on a case related to your mother. Adana's breath caught. You found her? The man hesitated. We may have. But I must warn you, what we discovered is not simple. Maxwell offered her a chair. She sat down slowly. Nnamdi pulled a photo from his folder. It was faded, but clear enough. A woman in her 40s, slim, with deep brown eyes just like Adana's. That's her, Adana whispered. That's my mom. Nnamdi nodded. She was last seen in 2011, after a break-in at your home. There were reports of masked men raiding the area. Many families were attacked. Several women were abducted. Most were never found. Adana clenched her fists. Where is she now? We traced her to a rural prison facility outside Ibadan. She's registered under a false name, Grace, likely given by her captors. Maxwell leaned forward. Why hasn't she been released? Nnamdi sighed. She was never properly processed. The prison she's in, it's unofficial. Secret. likely used by men in power to hide those they want to silence. We believe your mother saw something she wasn't supposed to, something connected to a powerful politician. Adana's eyes filled with tears. So she's trapped. Yes, but now that we have confirmation, we can work with human rights lawyers to get her out. Maxwell stood up. I'll fund everything. Lawyers, security, whatever it takes. Adana stared at him, silent. Maxwell stepped closer, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone anymore, Adana. We'll get her back. 2 months later, it wasn't easy. There were threats, delays, legal tricks. But with Maxwell's money and Nanamdi's experience, the truth broke through. One rainy afternoon, a black car pulled up outside the Anderson mansion. Adana stood on the porch, trembling. The back door opened, and out stepped a woman, thin, weak, but unmistakable. Mama? Sandra Okoye blinked, her lips parting in disbelief. Adana? And then she broke. They ran into each other's arms, falling to their knees in the rain, sobbing. Maxwell watched from the doorway, his own eyes wet. Behind him, Andrew peeked through the curtain. Is that her mom? Yes, Maxwell said. That's her mother. Weeks later, Sandra slowly recovered. She couldn't remember everything about her time in captivity, but she remembered Olivia Maxwell's late wife writing letters, promising to help. You married a good woman, she told Maxwell one evening. She would have been proud of the daughter you raised, Maxwell replied. Adana and Andrew were inseparable. Every night, Adana still sang to him. But now, Sandra sometimes joined in. Her voice was older, but it blended with her daughter's like warm honey. The house was full again. But fate wasn't done blessing Adana. 2 years later, Adana stood at the gates of the University of Lagos, her hands clutching her admission letter. She had been accepted into the College of Medicine. Her dream, one she buried under a bridge in Oshodi, was alive. Andrew was the first to hug her. You'll be the best doctor ever, he shouted. Maxwell threw her a party, inviting the entire neighborhood. The same girl who once begged for coins was now headed to medical school. 4 years later, Adana stood on stage in her blue academic gown, a gold medal hanging from her neck. The hall erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. Maxwell, Sandra, and Andrew were all on their feet, crying, clapping. The banner behind her read, Best Graduating Student, Faculty of Medicine. Adana bowed her head, humbled. She had once slept on concrete. Now she was wearing honor cords. After graduation, Adana was recruited by one of Lagos's top hospitals. Her story had gone viral, from underbridge to white coat. She gave interviews, featured on magazines, but she never forgot the boy who changed her life. Andrew. At the hospital's annual Tech Health Summit, Adana met someone new, Anderson Okafor, a 28-year-old software engineer from Anambra. Quiet, thoughtful, with a sharp mind and gentle smile. They sat next to each other during a panel discussion on health tech solutions for rural Nigeria. After that, they kept meeting at conferences, dinners, fundraisers. Their bond grew fast. Maxwell noticed. So did Andrew. One day, as they were walking in the garden, Anderson knelt beside the same flower pots Andrew and Adana once painted, and pulled out a ring. Adana, he said, from the moment I heard your story, I knew you were more than special. Will you marry me? Adana gasped. Yes. The wedding day. Lagos stood still. The event took place at Golden Bell Estate, in Ikoyi. Celebrities, dignitaries, and business leaders came, but all eyes were on Maxwell, walking Adana down the aisle in tears. She looked radiant in her white gown. Andrew stood beside her, tall and proud in his tuxedo. Sandra sat in the front row, glowing in gold. As Adana reached the altar, she looked back. She smiled at Andrew, the boy who brought her from darkness into light, the boy who just wanted her to sleep beside him, until they all found out why. That evening, at the wedding reception, Andrew pulled Adana aside. Can I tell you something? Of course, she smiled. I had another dream last night, but this one was different. Adana's smile faded. What did you see? Andrew's eyes narrowed. A man. In the shadows. Watching us. He said, the past isn't finished. He looked up. And he said your father is still alive. Adana stood still. The sound of music and laughter from the wedding reception faded as Andrew's words echoed in her ears like a thunderclap. He said, "Your father is still alive." Her eyes locked on Andrew's. He wasn't joking. There was no mischief, no teasing. Just a steady, serious gaze from the boy who once couldn't sleep unless she was beside him. "Andrew," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you sure?" He nodded slowly. "It felt real, just like when I dreamed about your mom before we found her. But this time, I couldn't see the man clearly. He was in the dark, watching, and then he whispered, 'She needs to find the truth. He's waiting.'" Adana's heart pounded. The joy of the wedding, the laughter, the food, the cheers, it all dissolved like mist. Was this really happening again? The next morning, Adana sat at the breakfast table with her new husband, Anderson. Her eyes were distant, the untouched cup of tea in front of her long gone cold. Anderson placed his hand gently over hers. "You didn't sleep last night." She shook her head. "And it's not just wedding nerves," he said quietly. Adana looked up. Her eyes were full of something heavier than exhaustion, something that felt like déjà vu. "Andrew had a dream," she said. "A dream that my father is still alive." Anderson raised his brows. "You told me he died during the raid. The night your mum was taken? That's what we thought. But we never saw his body. I was under the bed that night. I saw shadows. I heard screaming, but I never saw him again." Anderson paused. "Do you believe the dream?" "I didn't believe Andrew's dreams before, until the one that led us to my mother." There was silence. Adana's fingers curled around the teacup. "I have to find out. I need to know if he's really out there." Anderson nodded. "Then we'll find him. Together." Later that day, Maxwell had just returned from a business meeting when Adana entered his study. Her face was calm but firm. "I need Detective Namdi again." Maxwell set his briefcase down. "Is this about the dream?" She nodded. "I know it sounds strange, but so did the last one." Maxwell didn't argue. He had witnessed enough in the past few years to believe in the strange. "I'll call him immediately." 3 days later, Detective Namdi sat across from Adana in the same study where they once uncovered her mother's location. This time, a large map of Lagos and its surrounding states was spread out on the table. "Your father's name was Chuka Okoye, correct?" "Yes," Adana replied. "He worked as a contractor, built homes in Ibadan and Osogbo." Namdi tapped a pin into Osogbo. "We've pulled police records and security archives from that period. Chuka was never listed as dead. There was a missing persons report, but it went cold in 2012. There were rumors he was taken, not killed." Adana's heart skipped. "Taken? By who?" "That's the mystery." "But something odd came up," Namdi said, sliding a blurry photograph across the table. "This was taken 2 months ago. A community leader in a remote village near Kogi State snapped it while documenting a road project." Adana squinted. It was a group photo. 5 men in work clothes standing by a construction site. One of them, taller, older, with a thick beard, had eyes hauntingly familiar. Her heart jumped. "That's him." Namdi nodded. "We believe your father is alive, but he's lost his memory." Adana's breath caught. "What?" "He's been living under a new name, Papa Kalechi. The villagers say he wandered in years ago, confused and injured. He remembered how to build things, but not who he was." Maxwell stood up. "Where exactly is this place?" Namdi circled the map. "Nekede village, in Kogi, remote. No cell service, no proper road." Anderson entered the room just then. "Then we'll go by chopper." The next morning, a private helicopter flew Adana, Andrew, Anderson, Namdi, and 2 bodyguards toward Kogi. They landed on a patch of open field near a dusty village road. Children ran behind them, fascinated by the flying machine. An old man led them through narrow paths until they reached a modest wooden house with a tin roof. Inside, a man sat quietly, carving wood. His beard was overgrown, his hands rough. But the moment he turned to them, Adana gasped. It was him. Her father, Papa Kalechi? Namdi asked gently. The man turned, confused. Yes? Adana stepped forward slowly. Her voice trembled. Daddy? He stared at her. Something flickered in his eyes. His hands trembled. but his face remained blank. I don't know you, he said softly. Tears spilled from her eyes. It's me, your daughter, Adana. He looked down, rubbing his head. Adana? Adana? I've heard that name before. And then he clutched his chest, trembling. Flashes of memories tore through his mind like lightning. Gunshots, screams, a child crying under the bed. He dropped to his knees. I had a daughter, he whispered. Adana knelt with him. I'm here. I found you. Tears flooded his face. And then, like a miracle, he reached out and embraced her. My little girl, back in Lagos. Chuka Okoye received full medical attention. Though parts of his memory were still missing, the important pieces returned. His family, his work, and the night he was taken. I was kidnapped by the same men who took Sandra, he explained. They thought I had information about the property I was building for a corrupt senator. When I refused to help them, they beat me and dumped me near Kogi. I would have died if the villagers hadn't taken me in. Adana held his hand the entire time. Maxwell stood by the door, moved beyond words. You're safe now, Adana whispered. You're home. That night, as the family gathered to celebrate Chuka's return, Andrew sat quietly by the balcony, looking up at the stars. Adana joined him. You okay? She asked. Yeah, he nodded. Just thinking. He turned to her, eyes serious. If your mother was taken, and your father was taken, then maybe someone planned this. Adana froze. Maybe your family wasn't just attacked. Maybe they were targeted. She blinked slowly. But why? Andrew whispered. Because someone out there is still afraid of the truth. The Anderson mansion was quiet that night, too quiet for a home that had just welcomed back a long-lost father. Adana stood at the balcony of her room, looking out over the glimmering lights of Lekki. Her father, Chuka, was alive. He was in the guest room below, sleeping peacefully beside her mother for the first time in over a decade. But Andrew's words wouldn't leave her mind. Maybe your family wasn't just attacked. Maybe they were targeted. The idea felt like poison. And yet, deep inside, it made sense. Why would two ordinary people, her parents, be abducted on the same night, from the same house, by different groups? Why was her father left for dead with memory loss, and her mother hidden away in a ghost prison for years? There had to be more, and she needed to know the truth. The next morning, Detective Namdi returned to the mansion, this time with files Maxwell had requested. They were from over 12 years ago, land records, building contracts, client logs. Maxwell placed them on the dining table like puzzle pieces. Chuka, he said, turning to Adana's father. Back when you were working as a contractor, did you ever handle land for government officials or political figures? Chuka rubbed his forehead. Yes, there was one. A man named Chief Dominic Ekene. He was building a private estate outside Osogbo, but something was off. The land papers were fake. I raised concerns. And what happened? Namdi asked. I was threatened. I refused to continue the project, and that night our home was attacked. That was the last thing I remember before I woke up with villagers caring for me. Namdi exhaled slowly. Chief Dominic Ekene. He's now a senator. Very powerful. Very untouchable. Maxwell slammed his palm on the table. He tried to silence Chuka and buried Sandra to keep his secret. Adana's jaw tightened. We have to expose him. It won't be easy, Namdi said. He'll cover his tracks. We need evidence, something undeniable. Andrew, who had been quiet until now, suddenly stood. There's something. Everyone turned to him. I was digging through the server at Dad's company for an old science project. I came across digital blueprints. One of them had Chuka's name on the metadata. It was stored under a file marked Classified, Ekene Projects. Maxwell's eyes widened. Why would that file be in our system? Andrew shrugged. Maybe someone copied it years ago. Maybe Olivia kept it. Adana whispered. What if this is what my mother was protecting? What she wrote about in that letter, that evening? Inside Maxwell's secure home office, Andrew accessed the Anderson Group's encrypted archives. Maxwell stood behind him, arms crossed, while Adana and Namdi watched closely. The folder loaded. There it was. Classified. Ekene Projects. Dozens of files, maps, payment records, voice memos. Andrew clicked on an audio recording dated 1 week before Olivia's death. I know what Dominic did. He used fake permits to steal indigenous land. Chuka found out. Sandra helped me gather evidence. If anything happens to me, find Adana. Adana gasped. Her knees buckled, and Anderson caught her. That's her voice, she whispered. That's my mother. Another file popped open. A secret document linking Senator Dominic Akane to a private offshore account used to launder money from land grabs across Nigeria. It was enough. More than enough. 2 weeks later, the story hit the media like a hurricane. Senator Dominic Akane accused of human rights crimes, kidnapping, and land fraud. With Maxwell's help, the Anderson Foundation partnered with top investigative journalists to expose the full scandal. Sandra and Chuka told their stories on national TV. Olivia's audio files became part of a legal investigation. The government had no choice but to act. Senator Akane was arrested, his properties frozen, his allies vanished, and the ghost prison Sandra was locked in, raided and shut down. Dozens of women were freed. 1 year later, Adana stood on a podium in Abuja, her voice clear and strong. Justice isn't something you wait for. It's something you rise for. The crowd roared. She had been awarded the National Hero Medal for her advocacy, her work as a doctor, and her role in the takedown of one of the most corrupt men in history. Maxwell watched from the crowd, clapping with pride. Beside him, Sandra held her husband's hand. And in the front row, Andrew beamed. He was now in his final year at university, studying data science, already building a platform to protect whistleblowers in the country. That night, as the family gathered at the mansion, Adana tucked her baby girl Sandra into bed. And as she turned off the light, she heard Andrew's voice behind her. You know, he said with a grin, I still can't sleep unless I hear you sing. She laughed. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was taller, broader, more confident, but he would always be her little brother. She sang softly, her voice drifting through the halls. Sleep, my child. The night is near. Angels watch and keep you dear. In your dreams, no fear will stay. You are loved in every way. Andrew smiled, closing his eyes. Adana looked around the mansion one last time that night. It had started with a broken boy who couldn't sleep and a homeless girl who had nothing but a song. And now, a family was restored, a nation was changed, and peace had finally come. If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.